want to ask you the following question. Remember, we're talking about 3 billion people joining the fray. Population of the world in current projection is going to go to 8 billion, a little bit more, and then start going down. And no one knows really, but that's the tendency. Is the world better off now, or the world is worse off now? Before, why are we showing this on a technology class for accountants? So data and decisions. There is a lot of data. Technology correlates with wealth and correlates with well-being. And you don't know if technology is bringing the well-being or the well-being is allowing for technology. Yeah, that's a correlation question that you always have. But more, what did you find? Go a little bit deeper. Tell me what was the most striking thing for you. I tell you what it was most striking for me after I hear you. You know, they say, if you beat data enough, it will confess. Guys, this is a joke, okay? But it's exactly what Jeremy is saying here, is he drilled down enough on the data to tell a different story, a more interesting story. What did you think of his graphics? But first, that's why I wrote here, Gapminder. This is his not-for-profit that gives software for free. This is this guy's name, Hans Rosling. He's the superstar on TED. TED is this computer conference, happens every year, and the best people in the world in technology go there. And if you go on the internet and you look TED conference, you are going to see hundreds of these things, one more interesting than the other. You're going to not study introductory accounting, you're going to learn about the world. Very, very interesting. Now, what did you think of his graphics? By the way, every single continuous auditing project we do, the partner says, I want more visualization. You're going to hear both Paul Burns and Abdullah talking about their visualization in auditing project they are doing.
I really like how he had that trail feature. So you could
Trail is cool, isn't it?
But how it got there.
But did you notice that in the trail feature, just tagging on what he says, you actually saw things changing, but you couldn't quite figure it out? And then he puts the trail on, it becomes very clear of how things happened. And you know, this is pretty pedestrian software, correct? Have you thought that basically those bubbles that he had, he just basically charted them over the years and say 1 year, next year, next year, next year. And so the balls moved. It's pretty trivial software. He was making this big moan about data. The reason he's moaning about data is because most countries keep their data in different methods. There is not kind of a universal way of data access. So he has to do what we have to do, spend half of our time in our analysis preparing data to be compatible. That's why he's moaning. And we find that with companies too. What else, guys? Yeah, you wouldn't understand it where, you understand the story before he tells it to you, correct? He's talking about it, but you are seeing the thing happening. You know, on the data itself, what was the thing that struck you most? Not about the method and etc., but what he said, what concluded. I asked you at the beginning, is the world better off or worse off now? The world is much better off. Now, one thing I don't know if you noticed, he used this thing he called the logarithmic scale. And so instead of going 1, 2, 3, goes 1, 10, 100. So what this actually does makes things look better. Because if it didn't look better, it would stretch out very much. And the one thing is that the bubble here was around the $1 a day. That's abject poverty. That's very poor. So I think he paints things a little bit rosier than they are. But you know, when you look at things like child mortality, things really improved dramatically. I mean, not even a comparison. The other thing that's kind of strange is places like Cuba, Vietnam. Vietnam, the horrendous war in Vietnam. Look what happened to Vietnam. Conditions are nearly close to the United States, although pretty poor at this stage. Child mortality and average survival went down dramatically. What did you notice that he said about China? Remember, he talked about Mao, he talked about, what did he say about China? He said, healthier first, richer afterwards. If you get richer, it's more difficult to get healthier. Not more difficult, but takes longer. Okay? But for China, were any one of you not convinced that the condition for the average person in China got much better? I don't think many countries had the level of change that happened in China. You can be a big ideologue and say, well, it's a communist regimen and etc. But then you look what happened to their people. Pretty good, correct? That's why I see all of you here in class. Big change. What else did you notice here that was remarkable? You know, I think what Jeremy said about breaking things in some populations, analyzing, that was very interesting. The other thing I find it very interesting is very pedestrian graphics put together tell a much better story. I thought the trails are very good in the story. And I thought the one thing that he did there that maybe you didn't notice is he changed the axis. He went with average children per family, then he went with child survival, and then he went with incomes, and then he used a proxy for incomes. He changed the variables, and what he was doing is trying to explain you better the story he wanted to say. I'm not interested on his political motivation. As I told you, I'm not that interested in the politics of this. But I think this graphic, the reason I showed this graphic, is this is a technology story. It's a story of telling data in the best way you can. And it also tells you that if you beat the data a little bit, you learn much more about the data. Now, does this have application in accounting? Obviously, analyzing data is your job. And accountants will do more with graphics and etc. practically anyone, and much more in the future. And there are tools today that most companies are adopting, things like Tableau, Spotfire, ClickView. They are basically visualization tools. And you associated them with statistical packages like SAS, SPSS, or the public domains one like R, Weka, etc. So this does the statistic, this does the visualization. And even you can throw an Excel into here that does some of this stuff. And that's the way, that's what you're going to tell the story. Pay and me are in Morgan Stanley this week, and over there, you know, they are telling, we bought Tableau, you can use Tableau now, and etc. Go over to Brazil to talk with Itaú. Yeah, we bought Tableau, and everyone can use it. We also have SAS. Okay, and if the big businesses are using you as their auditors, are going to have to use it too. You're going to have to understand it, etc. But I find this Hans Rosling story very, very interesting. And I'm a great fan of Mr. Rosling. And you can go on the internet and find a lot of his videos. I like this particular one because it tells a story of the world. So while I'm talking about technology, you're learning something about the world, which is actually a good thing. And then you associate this kind of what Rosling was talking with the wall falling and the world is flat. Then you say, it's this interesting story. People are getting wealthier. Well, the world fall, and so 3 billion people progressing, going to the public markets. 3 billion people spending money is a lot of money. And so the walls between the countries are going to decrease because one country can produce rice, the other one produces electronics. So I need to trade rice for electronics, or I'm not going to have electronics, or I'm not going to have rice. Okay, so more people, wealthier people causes commerce. Commerce is what you're going to be measuring. So your skills as an accountant are going to be cross-national skills. You learn FASB rules, GAAP rules. That's not what the world uses. And anyway, those are not very good measures anyway. But technology creates a lot of change. And you look at the world is flat. Main components, some technological developments, some political developments, this whole population and person type of thing developments. And those one cause the other. It's an interactive type of thing. So we learned a little bit about that. It's not my area of expertise. I'll let someone else explain that to you. What I'm going to go and talk a little bit more about predicting technology. Okay, I talk a lot about AT&T because I was Bell Labs, and I was an employee of AT&T in addition to Rutgers until the end of last year when I retired from AT&T at Bell Labs. Okay, and AT&T in 69 says picture phone service may be $1 billion business by 1980. What is picture phone service? Yeah. Actually, it wasn't exactly a video phone. It was a screen associated with your phone, and yeah, that's right, a video phone, okay, and the screen in the other side, and the information being transmitted to twisted pair, like we discussed last time. And I was at the consumer lab at AT&T, and we developed these products, anything for small screens and the same line, or big screens. And what happened, put small screen, the image moved reasonably fast, but of course it was a small screen. The moment you put the big screen in there, the image became very blurry because you could not transmit a lot of bits per second. Okay, and so we kind of did a study, recommended the size, and then AT&T announced the product. And this was my 88 or 89. And the product was a screen to work with your telephone, cost $1,500. Guess how many people bought it? No one. And then they divided it by 2, sold it for $750. No one bought it either. So this market totally didn't take off. Okay? And can you tell me why? Yeah, that was my problem. My mom was ailing and she lived in Brazil. And I wanted her to see their grandchildren. So I had to carry a screen to Brazil. And I was a Bell Labs, so I could steal one. I didn't need to buy one. Okay? So I borrowed one, and I took it. Okay? And I have a lot of technical difficulties to make it work. It barely worked. Okay? Now, is this idea of a telephone with image a compelling idea? My daughter had a baby, she's 8 months, and my daughter had to go and show her new film this week, like Monday, Tuesday, in California. So she was crying her mind off because she was leaving the baby behind for a day and a half. So she goes off to California, I pick up my cell phone, okay, put in the image, and hold the baby here and talk to her. And the baby sees her, she sees the baby, and the two of them start crying, okay? So obviously it has a big emotional effect here. And they were so happy at the end of it, particularly my daughter. Okay, so she changed her flight. Instead of coming on Wednesday back, she came at the Red Eye on Tuesday night because she wanted to see the baby. Okay, but that's what sells a product, by the way, is the strong emotions. Now, is there a picture phone today available? Of course there is. I just used it. When you guys want images of other people, what do you use? Huh? I use Skype. Yeah. Yeah, and why don't I use my cell phone in FaceTime? Because it's not as comfortable in Skype. Say that again? Well, that's the advantage of your cell phone. So what are the contingencies here? Do you have it available? Do you have the bandwidth around? Okay, and what do you want to do? Meaning, I like to talk with my PhD students to Skype from home. And I think it's better for them when I do that because it's a one-to-one thing, as opposed to many people around and being disturbing. But I like to see the facial expression, so I use video Skype. And some of them say, my camera is not working. That means I'm in my underwear in my office or something like that, in my home or something, or they don't want you to see them. Okay, but I kind of like to look. Now, when we do a lot of group projects with companies, I actually want a face-to-face. Actually, we are tomorrow going over to Morgan Stanley with the PA class because I think they need to meet the client. They need to sit down and do some face-to-face. Now, every week, schlepping to Manhattan is too much. So it works. But actually what happened here is that they didn't have that business because the technology was in this stage, the hype curve. And by the way, just the idea of transmitting image and voice, very powerful. The way they want to deliver it was impractical. And the economic model was impractical. Always two things, the technology and the economic model. We'll continue this discussion in a second. You guys know who Thomas Edison is? Okay. If they ask a user what they want in relation to candles, they would have said longer burning, smokeless candles, never the light bulb. What is he saying here? I think what he's saying is this. If you are very close to something, you don't come up with a disruptive model, with a very different model. Okay, we learn this in systems. You know, when you talk to your users, they can say, oh, this report is not so good. Try to put this column here, find this information, etc. They are good at that, incremental improvement. They are not good in very big change. Like the telegraph guys could not see that telephone was going to dominate the world. There is a book called The Innovator's Dilemma by a guy called Clayton Christensen. It's in the list of books I sent you. And that book, this professor of Harvard, he was a big guru of the dot-com innovation thing, and his dissertation thesis was about innovation in the disk drive business. And I'm going to show you this division, but he divides the world into sustaining and disruptive technologies. And he said and the name of the book is Innovator's Dilemma, Why Big Successful Companies Fail. And basically they say big successful companies have their model, they don't want to change the model. They don't want disruption. And think about this because we are going to talk about this over and over again in the next few minutes. You guys know who Marconi was? Certainly other nationalities don't think that an Italian living in the United States invented the radio. Like other nationalities don't believe that Santos Dumont invented the airplane, a Brazilian, okay? And etc. The discussion about who invented what is a long one, okay? But Marconi ran an experiment in Wireless Road in Long Island where two people communicated with each other without wires, correct? That is undiscussable. Okay, this was 1894. And then someone had this idea of, instead of Marconi talking with his buddy, someone had this idea of Marconi talking with many buddies, and only Marconi talking. So this was the idea of broadcasting. And then someone said, you know, if I'm broadcasting to many people, I might advertise my Crest toothpaste or whatever, manufacturing. So here it is. This is the invention. This is an adaptation of the technology to do something else. And this is the business model. Three things. Invent the technology, find the right thing to use it for, and then create a business model. But, you know, the United States followed the Second World War all by radio, all by broadcasting. And the broadcasting became a potential model for picking up the technology and making money on it. And when people started doing that, the radio technology was used. And this is kind of a second thing. Ensuing users far outweigh the original intent. Original intent was a device developed for one-to-one communication. And one-to-one wireless communication didn't become ubiquitous until cell phones. Correct? Meaning, remember the thing about Western Union? That thing says, well, there might be a special use between the command and the engine room of a ship. Certain particular communication between two ships. There is no other way to do it. Okay? But it's not ubiquitous. And tell me, just advance this for a second. Why is now wireless communication so prevalent? Didn't people want to talk to each other 100 years ago? Of course they did. Wasn't there Marconi's technology there? Of course it was. So why didn't it happen? Expensive and lack. There was no infrastructure to provide that, correct? We were here in the hype curve. We were here in the beginning. You know, both Thomas Edison and many other inventors had to invest in technology. Edison and Bell. Edison had to build power plants, wire between the power plants and the houses and the factories before he could have industrial power and etc. Telephone, same story. Bell had to create networks of telephony, infrastructure to put things in together. And think about, stay with this, think about ensuing use. Technology facilitates and creates things. Business model creates real use. Different business models may create different type of products. Technology and business model are different things and both require creativity. I don't know, you probably still remember, there was a thing called the Betamax. And there was, what else? VHS. Which one was technologically better? Betamax was far better. There is a thing called a Mac or a PC, Apple and Mac. There is a thing called the PC standard, which is not a Mac, is like Windows, DOS, etc., etc. Which one was better? Which one is better? This is a religious question, correct? It's like Sunni versus Shiite. Apple is better. Okay, it has better in the beginning, is better now, is an integrated project, there is less problems, and etc. Why 94% of the market uses the PC standard? How many of you have Apples here? Wow, look at this, more than half. Wow, I've never seen this. Is it better? No? Oh, because you didn't use both, so you don't know the comparison. It's better. Yeah. Oh, so you're talking business model matters. Okay. Story. Did you see this film called Pirates of Silicon Valley? Pirates of Silicon Valley is a film, actually despite Jobs talking to Gates. And Gates goes and visits Jobs in his little factory at that time. And Gates shows him this new version of the Apple. That was the Apple II, still character-oriented. And this thing is actually Windows. with the mouse and et cetera, the way you recognize it today. And say, this is great, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 6 months later, they meet again, and Jobs is furious. Say, I told you a secret, you betrayed me and created Windows. And then Jobs returns to him, and then Gates returns to him and said, no, you stole it from Parc, and I just copied. Okay, actually the Windows technology was developed by Palo Alto Research Center. And Apple adopted it, paid royalties, so wasn't really stealing. And then and that thing took off. The Macintosh, first the Lisa, then the Macintosh, just took over the markets because it was better. How come Windows has more of the market? Much more of the market. That's a consequence, but he has more applications to it.
Used to not be able to get software from Apple unless it came from Apple.
Open sourcing. You know, I was actually a little bit surprised that I asked, is Apple better? And they said, I don't know, and etc. Apple has been always better, always ahead. The Macintosh was revolutionary. The Apple II before the Macintosh was totally revolutionary. And by the way, Jobs, with his Apple II, selling in every school that they could, went to IBM and said, do you want to buy me? You know what IBM said? We are not interested. Polaroid went to Kodak and said, we are not interested. Western Union was not interested on the telephone. Does that tell you a story? Now, the Apple was better. What the problem always have been is that the Apple have been more expensive. In addition to being more expensive, they don't subcontract. They don't allow other people to manufacture their product. They don't give the license away. Because of that, I'll tell you another interesting story as far as telling story and is relevant. Computers starting developing with these little kits and personal kits. That's when I showed you that story saying that Bill Gates says that 560K is good for everyone, etc. And or people saying, the guy from Digital Equipment saying, no one needs a computer at home. But actually, not too many years ago, people were assembling computers with kits, these personal computers. And even today, people do that. Okay, they bought a chip from here, they bought a disk drive from there, and put it together. Okay, and then it became obvious to companies like Commodore, Osborne, etc., that PCs were a valuable thing. And there would be a market for that. And that's when Apple started putting their story together. IBM was very late on the game. They didn't want to buy Apple. But then they realized that, wow, there is a market there. As a huge market, they even realized that they would be dead if they didn't have a PC. So what did they do? They said it takes us 5 to 7 years to go to a total production cycle within IBM. Because IBM didn't subcontract anything. They design and manufacture themselves. Remember, IBM and the Seven Dwarfs, larger computer company in the world, they occupied more than half of the computer market of the world. That big. So they found this guy who was kind of a maverick within IBM, a guy called Eskridge, and say, you go to Florida, to Boca Raton, and create a PC for us in 2 years. The guy was a maverick, didn't follow IBM rules, but was very good. So he said, we need an operating system. Who makes operating systems? Advanced Data Research and DOS. Microsoft, actually. So he called both of them up and said, we need an operating system for IBM. Both of them were in a conference in San Diego hobbyist conference. Hobbyist conference putting PCs, people that use self-made PCs or etc. They called Advanced Data Research, don't answer their call. Secretary sitting in Microsoft said, is IBM calling? So holds them on the line, calls San Diego, gets Bill Gates on the phone and say, IBM is calling. Bill Gates, IBM is calling, calls them, and goes directly from Florida to from California to Boca Raton, Florida, to meet Eskridge. He remembers that IBM, everyone wears ties and white shirts. So he stopped by J.C. Penney's in the airport, buys himself a suit. He's in blue jeans, very relaxed. Okay, goes to IBM. Gets in there, 6 executives sitting there, all in blue jeans to make him feel comfortable. Okay, and at that moment, he sets up a deal with IBM about providing the DOS operating system for IBM. It wasn't exclusive. They had finished up making a deal with Advanced Data Research. And so you could buy the IBM PC with one of the 2 operating systems. Same time Bill Gates was doing that, he's calling this little company in Seattle to buy DOS from them. Because they had a license, they hadn't developed DOS. What they had is a basic compiler that they were selling that they had made. So, you know, this is the genius of Bill Gates. He is a very good businessman. Don't think him as a technologist or a visionary. He is a good businessman, very good business. He bought, the other thing what he did, he allowed, and this architecture that IBM put together, they also went and needed chips. Who is the bigger chip maker in the world? Intel. So they buy chips from Intel. And they put the computer together with someone's operating system, someone chip, and in 2 years they had it out. And they had it out, and the IBM PC, then IBM PC XT all came out. And they rapidly took over some of the Apple market. Apple had like 60% of that market at that time. Why did they take out? Because it was cheaper. The other thing is that it wasn't a proprietary technology. What does that mean? Anyone, like Dell, could buy that same components and assemble the same type of computer. And then comes the thing that you are talking about. Because there are a lot of people who have the same computer, the economics of putting software together for that kind of configuration of computer becomes much better. Because there are more people going to buy it. Remember the drawing here, fixed cost overrides variable cost. So the big cost is starting it. And then incremental cost is very close. So there's all these people developing software, and software developers gravitate to where there are many users, because this is where they make their money, in the tail end. Now, that has been the story of Apple all along. And if you were here in my classes 4 or 5 years ago, I already said, you know, the iPhone is not going to dominate these markets because they don't subcontract. And who is dominating the market now, the smartphone market? Samsung. Why? Because it's an open standard. And more people are going to buy the open standard, more people are going to develop applications for it. And now we are seeing Apple coming up with a new model right now, correct? And actually, this is the story. You said, you know, I was kind of surprised hearing here that, well, you don't know if Apple is, and the IBM PC is better. Apple has always been better, but when something you develop Windows-oriented, the other one copies you one way or the other, okay? And the Android had a feature that Apple decided to copy because it was very important, okay? And so this is this constant game, but Apple will not dominate these markets because it's more expensive product. And what they decided, I think strategy-wise, is that that's okay that they won't dominate the market. In the beginning, they'll make a lot of money. At the beginning, as soon as you're finished with the basic investment, and if this is a new technology, you make a lot of money because your margins can be very large. I'm going to show you the breakdown of their costs in another lecture, and you're going to see. And this is the thing is about technology, application, and and the cost and the business model. Okay, very fast. Bell develops this telephone technology. Remember, we already talked about this. Western Union doesn't want it. Why did he need Western Union? Because Western Union had a structure in place, had wires everywhere. They had money. They have offices in every city in the world, or in main cities of the world. So Western Union was there and had the basis to develop the infrastructure needed. That didn't work. So he started selling his technology to smaller companies. So this thing of not having to get out and going to talk to someone, calling them up, is very compelling. More compelling than Polaroid. Meaning the ability to talk with your friends on the phone, call your mom every morning, talk with your boss is very important. So a lot of companies started, we used to call them the ICO, independent companies, start developing telephone systems. But remember what I said? The value of telecommunications is proportional to the square of the users. 1 user, value 1. 10 users, value 100. 100 users, value 10,000. So the small companies had a big disadvantage to the big companies. So the big companies would not interconnect with the small companies. So what happened? What would happen is that the big companies would progressively destroy the small companies. U.S. government goes in. Very good. You say, don't intervene. Government should not intervene. Baloney. The government had to intervene in this situation. It was good for the economy, good military, good for everything. So the government says, we allow AT&T to become the monopoly, but AT&T has to create a general standard and needs to allow to interconnect. So we created this. Every telephone had a number like this, an area code and a number. And the technology was such that you could connect these numbers. Every telephone had a unique denominator. Yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or keep. Depends on the company. They're all over the map. There somewhere numbers, somewhere letters. Like you gave Matt was the name of your phone number if you're the first to ask for it. Okay, it was very confusing, and you know these were wired together systems. Okay, but the U.S. government did very well. They created a unique standard. They allowed Bell Labs to be created, and Bell Labs was created basically to create a common standard of telephony. And every state had a different algorithm of charging the cost of Bell Labs to their customers. That's why Bell Labs didn't hold any of their patents for most of the time. Why? Because it was publicly paid, so they didn't own the patent. Very good move by the U.S. government. And basically the things got integrated. And as I told you last time, the story is that until the courts forced AT&T to divest of their operating companies, meaning AT&T giving up Verizon and the other operating companies, U.S. had the best telephone system in the world by far. When AT&T was forced to divest, competition finished. There was less competition started, but there was much less investment. The quality of the telephone system deteriorated. And then the FCC managed to improve a little bit the competition environment, and et cetera, et cetera. I already told you the story of the instant photography. Fax. What is fax? Do you still remember a fax machine? Yeah. Fax actually has been around in the 60s. And it's basically scanning and transmitting over wires the scan image, and there is a standard to it. And nothing happened to fax until the 70s. And then someone discovered that you could transmit blueprints over fax. And then some large companies started buying faxes to transmit blueprints between their different offices. And then some businessman discovered that, well, if they have a fax, I can send them a bill through fax. And so fax just exploded. At the same time, the device went from $2,000 to $200. So what that really allowed this, the popularization of the thing. But what is a fax? A fax is actually a PC with a scanner, correct? Or a very dumb PC with a scanner. And now you can do mainly faxes without, you basically scan and send an attachment, correct? So what is the future of fax? Disappear totally? Probably .fax. Probably still they will, some people have the device and some people have the history of transmitting fax. So instead of PDF, it's going to be FAX. There is a standard FAX.
I don't know about scan.
Actually, what you are describing here is the constant battle of keeping the laws updated, meaning like, is an electronic signature a legitimate signature? Depends on the country, depends on the county, depends on the state. And, you know, if you go to Romania, nothing of that can be done. You have to take your piece of paper and someone puts a stamp on it. Okay, I visited as a faculty member at a university in Romania, and this guy came to meet me in Bucharest. This was in close to Hungary, so it wasn't close to Budapest. And for him to get reimbursed by his train, he had to go to the office of the dean of another university and get a stamp to get the money back. Okay, and this is not that far ago. Okay, it's just laws change slowly, yeah. That's what I think Jeremy was raising here. The legal standards and the habits are the big inhibitors. It's not the technology. But depends on the laws of the country if that's legal or not. Yeah, if they are going to accept it or not. And we talked enough about video, so I'm not going to talk about video. Okay, this is actually the book I was talking to you about. And this is Clayton Christensen. He has 2 follow-up books. I don't think it's as good as this book. It's probably worthwhile. Think of it. I'm going to just show you a couple of things out of that book. Before that, just talking about something. I mentioned the word Parc, Palo Alto Research Center. I also mentioned that Xerox and Polaroids were the big tech companies of the early 70s. And Palo Alto Research Center belongs to Xerox. And the director of that thing was a guy called John Seeley Brown. And he was a major visionary. Actually, I had the privilege of teaching with him in an MBA program for a few years together. And he basically got Xerox to invest on this research center. And look at their innovations. Graphic user interface, PC Windows. The Windows, Parc developed, Jobs put it on the Apple, Gates stole it for Windows, they also paid license. Mouse, laser printers, Ethernet, all the walls, twisted, in addition to twisted pair, remember a coaxial, that's Ethernet. Desktop publishing, word processing, bitmap display. This is all associated to Parc. Look who the market leaders, let's say 10 years ago, were on these things. Do you see anyone written Xerox here? Doesn't that tell you something? These guys invented the stuff. They had the patents. They made money. They sold rights to the patent, but didn't make a lot of money. They just couldn't capitalize on the technology they developed. They couldn't transfer the technology to their products because we are a copier company. We work on copiers, meaning the copier company, Xerox, was even behind on things like transmitting data to print. Like we now, Xerox copiers also are scanners and etc. They were behind that. Other companies developed that. And they were the inventors of the Ethernet. They were the inventors of bitmap. It's a shame, correct? It's a real shame. Xerox could be bigger than IBM today if they had the vision. And this is actually what Christensen says, is big, fat companies that are very successful on what they do, they have no ability to change their business model. And some people were predicting that AT&T was going to be destroyed by the internet. And in one sense it was, in other sense it wasn't. Because AT&T went from 1.2 million employees before divestiture to 350,000 employees after divestiture, when they gave out the 7 operating companies, just stayed with the long distance business. And by the time that they were bought by one of their old subsidiaries, they had 35,000 employees. But the telephone business didn't disappear. Why? Technology adoption, and the other thing is the internet requires a backbone of communication. The internet, you know, the wireless is very narrow bandwidth. You need a wire, and you need a lot of wires to transmit information. And who had the wires? AT&T had the wires. The long-distance wires were owned by the long-distance telephone companies. And what they did is they pulled the copper out of that, sell the copper in the market, and put fiber in. And a lot of fiber. There is a lot of fiber around the world. Okay? And so they had this core part of the business. Everything else could go to pot. They still have the backbones selling it. And then they, of course, you know, they didn't have, we wrote a memo to them, my center, my group, wrote a memo to them suggesting them to create a wireless company. This is mid-80s, okay? And they said, we don't know how to operate a small company. We are a large, long-distance company. The head of AT&T at that time was an ex-president of Bell of Pennsylvania. Of course he knew how to operate a company. But then a few years later, they actually went out and bought largest wireless operator by Marlowe's company. And they created their own long-distance company, spent $5 billion on that purchase. Maybe they were right. Maybe they just waited until someone grew big enough and then they bought it. Okay, maybe our suggestion was premature. We also wrote a memo to them later about the footprint of cable. And we said, you know, the natural thing for you to provide internet services is through the cable infrastructure. So they actually went out and bought, and I don't know if it was because of a memo or whatever, I'm sure they were looking at the same thing. They bought about 40% of the footprint of cable in the United States. Problem is that company shrinking very rapidly. They were spent too much money, and they were going to go bankrupt. And so what happened? They were bought off by Bell South. And actually two of the operating companies merged and bought AT&T up, and they adopted the old name, AT&T. So AT&T was like Humpty Dumpty fell in the wall. Okay? Humpty Dumpty came back together partially, except that one of their babies, Verizon, is now the major competitor. But it's a very, very rapid change. And the problem with AT&T that they couldn't quite handle the disruptive technology. Okay, and of course, you know, when I seen these studies and these talking about, the prediction internal was that the telephone business, long distance and consumer business, were going to collapse. And why would they collapse? Because an alternative technology was coming. What is the alternative technology? Huh? Yeah, is voice over the internet. We call it VoIP, voice over IP. And instead of being able to charge 17 to 30 cents per minute, this will be pretty much free. It's a byproduct of broadband. So we knew this. Now, what do you do if you see a technology cannibalizing your business. If you go into that technology, you basically capitalize your business faster. And what you're interested is in the integral of this curve. If the curve goes a little bit flat, it's billions of dollars more that you do. If the technology goes very rapidly, you lose billions of dollars. So what is the objective when you see that your technology is being cannibalized? Slow that change the maximum that you can. You know, banks did that. Banks started seeing internet banking. So what many of the big banks did, they created other banks that were internet banks, but didn't give their name to it. Because they didn't want to accept it. I mean, the moment Citibank and Chase would do internet banking, the old banking that they make so much money out of it. Merrill Lynch wasn't the first, not the second, not the 10th to do online trading. They held that as back as they could because they were trying to hold off cannibalization. And actually, this is what basically they say is disruptive technology bring a different value proposition to the world than existing technology products. Generally underperform established products immediately in the mainstream market. First, they work in little segment markets and then expand. They're usually cheaper, simpler, and more convenient to use. Typically yield lower margins, have improvement targets that allow them to attack mainstream markets in the future. And every single one of these that I talked to you about are disruptive technologies. Telephone, fax, internet, voice over IP. They are all things that destroy the markets. So let me ask you this. What are the disruptive technologies to accounting? Yeah. What did accountants used to do? They used to basically bookkeep, correct? And that was a manual intensive job. For every sale you did, you had to do a ledger entry. That's gone, correct? Sales are being identified since when they happen. That's gone. Most bookkeeping, journalizing, ledgerizing are gone. No more transcription, no more multiplication by hand. It's all gone. So what happened to the accounting business? Computers replaced most of the things that are done manually. Yeah. It's automation that's basically disrupting the business. Now we have a franchise, and that's why I started talking about it earlier, which is the government requires that every publicly traded companies issue a financial report, correct? And they require that someone attests to it. So that's a franchise. What would happen if the government abolished that requirement? Did Western Union find something else to do? Yeah, but 90% of the employees, 95% employees, 99% employees are gone. So it's not the same company anymore.
But company is doing accounting not only for like government stuff, but also for itself. So they will need to keep a record from themselves.
But most companies do their own accounting. They don't hire CPA firms to do their accounting. Some do. Small CPA firms do accounting work. Remember, you are not allowed to attest to something that you prepared. Interesting question, correct? Is a changing world here. So if the government say you don't need an audit statement, the big four would disappear the way we know them. Everyone is so sad here. Is there a chance that the government will do that? Why not? I said this is not a very useful function. Financial statements are bad statements. Attesting to bad statements is not such a good idea. It's at least not so useful. So why is not going to happen? Yeah, I think that that's the best argument around it, is, you know, a lot of the problems before the Big Depression were actually companies being traded in the stock markets that did not exist, literally not exist. And there has happened cases, ZZ Best, for example, that basically had a building and nothing else. And so obviously you would like someone to have a look to see what you are trading publicly exists. Now this is not as easy as you think. Remember what I talked about the Cambrian moment? Now there are companies selling millions and millions of dollars with 5 employees. I actually going to show you examples of companies that went out in the stock market, did a public offering, were valued at billions of dollars, and they had 5 employees. Now you like that, correct? You don't like that unless you are the receiver side, correct? Can you imagine you go out? Did you see this this recent offer by Facebook, buying, what's the name of the, Oh, no, the one before that. No. I'm just blanking. Here. Facebook bought WhatsApp. You know how much they're paying for WhatsApp? 15 to 19 billion, depends on the performance of WhatsApp. WhatsApp has like 20 employees, if that much. Yeah? So why is WhatsApp worth so much money? Why is Facebook worth so much money? They don't make a lot of money themselves. Yeah. It's the future. They say that teenagers don't like Facebook anymore. They are using other tools. Instagram is cool. My daughter spends a lot of time on Instagram. Baby's pictures are in Instagram all the time. My dog's pictures are in Instagram all the time. But are these values reasonable, the billions of dollars values on this thing? I think they paid for WhatsApp like $40 per user. I think what you're talking is about the business model here, and how can you monetize. What is WhatsApp? What is Facebook? It's a large number of users paying nothing. And I think the question is, how do you monetize this? And one way to monetize it is selling advertising that they see. The other way to monetize what Brian is talking about, additional analytics that can serve for marketing and other purposes. Can serve to NSA, can serve to anyone that needs massive data for something. Okay. But you forgot the other part that we talk about. We talk about Times Warner, talk about this crazy, crazy values that Google and Time Warner and Facebook are paying for companies. Remember we had the new GE story, and the prices are steep, 500 million, a billion. Yeah. What did we say there? Money comes cheap to these guys. Why? Because the multiplier is very high. Now, do you think that WhatsApp will be worth $19 billion to Facebook sometime? So how can you make money on that? You buy Facebook fast and sell it fast. So as soon as it takes the run, when Facebook went public, the value went down. And I said, this is time to buy it. But long range, I don't think keeping Facebook is that good. Eventually, Facebook is going to happen what happened with MySpace, America Online, etc., etc., unless they come up with some other ways to monetize it. We're actually doing a lot in looking at the privacy issues in Facebook, and they're very interesting because what they are trying to monetize has very big privacy implications. But you know, this is a story of sustaining technologies versus disruptive technologies. And now we are starting to talk that sustaining technology, Facebook, disruptive technology, WhatsApp and Instagram. Wow. Sustaining technology, Google, disruptive technology, Facebook. Interesting, correct? Very interesting. God knows what's going to be happening. Actually, I think there is a reasonable way to predict it. Okay, and this is actually picked up somewhere, maybe and basically talks about companies whose roots were in disruption. And, goes from Kodak, Bell Telephone, etc., Sony, etc., Cisco Pilot, and then other companies that progressively were disrupted technology. And you see all the companies get disrupted by technology. You will recognize most of these names. Okay, Intel microprocessor, Canon photocopying, Embraer and Canadair with small planes, disrupting Boeing and etc. Yes. Where? This one? Yeah, this is actually a standard of telecommunication, like 802.11 is, it's Wi-Fi. Say that again? It's not a company. It's a technology that is disruptive. And actually, there are several of them here. Portable diabetes. Okay, that's a technology. Computers and Dell. That was assembling your own computer. By the way, I tried to buy a Dell yesterday, 2 days ago. And you can't configure the Dells anymore like the way you used to. You used to be able to put every piece together. That's what made Dell so popular. Now you go there, they give you some packages that you can take, and that's it. So that model is gone. Interesting. Okay. Go ahead. No, you can customize it a little bit. It's not, in the old days, you could literally go and configure your Dell exactly the way you wanted, and you get it within 7 days. And 3 days of that was transportation. So they basically assembled it. And now they figured out that that doesn't give them such an advantage anymore. And so they give you packages. And there is a lot of packages that you can pick up. But we wanted a very powerful PC. We finished up having to buy a server. And it wasn't exactly what we wanted. Is that bad or that's good? Me too. Me too. And I think there is a market hole there that someone else could do. But this is like Jeremy was talking. The laws limit this. I actually am technically required to buy a Dell because that's the deal that the university has. I have to get 2 signatures to approve a non-Dell computer. Okay, and this question is, do I want badly enough to go to another vendor? Most likely not. Okay, and most likely what means is I'm going to buy a much more expensive computer from Dell than I would buy with my minimum requirements, because I have to go with Dell and I have certain things I want. But I want to tell you something a little bit else that is related to this, is Dell grew. And why did Dell become such a powerful market, like the major PC maker for a while, now not anymore? Why? That was part of it. The main thing was just configure your own computer and get it delivered in 7 days. Okay, and actually what they did is that they had like this supplier managed inventory story. Therefore, they really didn't carry any of the parts that they assembled. It's the suppliers that carry the parts, meaning in their books. And the Only when the computer was being manufactured became Dell's, and Dell never manufactured anything without having it sold already. So they really kind of were managed by someone else's working capital. And they had tremendous agility, put this together. And why is Dell now having great business problems? I mean, they are not growing the way they did before. They brought Michael Dell back, and he didn't manage to really turn it over. Why? Yeah, that were the two things. One of their paramount capacities was good customer service. They outsourced it to India. Actually, I talked to a support from Dell, and the guy was pretending that he was American. Okay, I said, how is the weather there? I'm trying a Texas drawl from India. Okay, so that wasn't very, very convincing. Okay, and then of course they were not very good. So, you know, I had to ask them to escalate and escalate. And finally I talked with someone in Texas, and finally the thing got resolved. But I think their customer service reputations was really hurt. And they abandoned this configure your own computer model because they thought it was inefficient. And because the scale became so big that they had to outsource it to different places and became much more difficult to manage. So they had a business model, and the business model was outgrown by their circumstances. That's unfortunately the story is. Now, how many of you have Dell laptops? 1/3. Used to be 80%. How many of you have Lenovo laptops? That's growing. Lenovo was IBM. Do you know that? Yeah. IBM, and then they started manufacture in China. They subcontracted with Lenovo, and then Lenovo bought IBM PC brand. But they continue working together to a certain degree. And a lot of you have Apples. Interesting, correct? If I would have asked this class 10 years ago who had Apples, there would be maybe one hand would go up. And it would turn out that was a person that was a teacher before in their school, there was Apples. And why are the Apples so popular again? Yes. Yes, they are beautiful. They are good. Good technology and takes care of the computer dumbness. Basically avoids a lot of technical problems you had with PCs. But the second reason is they are compatible with your carriers, with your iPhone, with your tablets. The compatibility is very powerful. And they are driving compatibility need by having cloud synchronization. Meaning, one of the big pressures to buy Apple laptops is because you can easily, although you can do it in PCs too, can easily integrate. And you don't have to worry with it too much. Yes or no? You agree or you don't agree? Hey, these are my theories. You can disagree. Michael, what do you think? You see, when he's reading his computer, he's not paying attention. And Samsung copied what Apple was doing, and is doing it cheaper and with more vendors, because it's more advantageous to be a vendor from Samsung. You know, Apple actually has announced that they were going to allow other vendors to put some of the Apple stuff together. They have done that 2 or 3 times in the past and backed out of it. Now, I always attributed that to Jobs. Jobs is not around anymore. So let's see. Very anal personality job. Did you see the film Jobs? It's a great film, isn't it? It explains a lot about Apple, correct? Yeah. There's 2 films worthwhile seeing. Jobs and Pirates of Silicon Valley. Very interesting, tell you a lot of history. I actually think that the reason the Apples are back into reputation is because they are similar to the iPhone, because they synchronize well over the cloud, and they are beautiful, but they are expensive. Can 1 or 2 of you tell me why you opted to go back to an Apple after a PC? Okay, so it was a technical incompatibility problems. Easier to use. Any one of you think about compatibility with your iPhone? That's why I don't have an Apple laptop, but I have an iPad. I even got an Apple for my daughter. Okay, I think that, as you said, they are beautiful. They're really good technology. Yeah. Historically, I have to agree. Historically, the Microsoft products on the Apple were always a little bit behind, or very much behind. Well, Microsoft, why would Microsoft want? Microsoft wants people in Apple to buy Microsoft, so they want that. But they don't want it to override. The major source of money is still Windows, correct? So they don't want it to be much ahead of Windows. Yeah. Used to be a total different worlds. Microsoft started copying Apple because Apple is beautiful and is good. Okay? Progressively, Microsoft expanded. It's cheaper. The Microsoft standard is cheaper. More vendors came to it because it's a bigger customer base. It came to a point that 95, 96% of all PCs were the DOS standard or the Wintel standard, if they call it. 5% are in the Apple domain. Jobs came back to Apple. What Jobs did is brought heavy breathing to Apple stuff. They were hot, they are beautiful, they are well done, and they do things that the other ones couldn't do it. So people started migrating back. So Microsoft started copying. But the big market was in the DOS side, so they had to create compatibilities, or they wouldn't work together. So they created these two operating systems that you can do DOS and you can do iOS. Okay, you can do Apple and DOS. And so it's kind of, now it's kind of a, this goes better, that goes better, they keep going back and forth, yeah. It's not a better machine, it's a better computer to use. A machine is a chip. And, it could be a Motorola chip, it could be a AMD chip, could be whatever. But the operating system on top of it defines your user experience. And Apple user experience has been better over time, like Betamax was better than VHS. Usage superiority, better user experience. In Apple products, in general, is a better user experience, but is more expensive. You pay for it. A computer is like a girlfriend. It has features. And certain girlfriends have certain features that are better than others. Or a boyfriend has certain features. And depending on your preference, you choose one or the other. And there is the girlfriend also has the cost issue, correct? So all of those things kind of take into consideration. I see that Brian was kind of saying, he still didn't answer my question about his better machine. It's like a girlfriend. Girlfriend has certain good characteristics, certain bad characteristics. And actually, I think there is very much of a pendulum. My prediction has been, since Jobs died, is that the kind of the coolness of the Apple devices were going to decrease. And I don't find what I heard about the new iPhone, I don't find it as tantalizing as a new job launching. I was expecting Apple to come up with a real good watch or a real good glasses. Because that has been where they made the big monies was in the new iPhone and in the new iPad. Okay, and in the music stuff and et cetera, et cetera. That's what they make. But they are very diversified now, so I don't know what they are going to do. Yeah. So you say that applications based on some kind of technological feature drive the markets? But that's actually a very interesting question. I have a set of slides that goes to the Samsung and the components of the modules that are inside there, the chip, the sensor, the oscillometer, and etc. Are you going to use your telephone as your walking thermometer, or you're going to go to a bar in Germany and put a chip under your skin and carry that thing? It's really the question, where is this device going to be? Very interesting evolution. And this is actually where the money was made in the PC industry. And look at that. There is the customer. He pays for it. And then you pay an operating system to Microsoft. You pay a microprocessor with Intel. The memories, the disk drive and storages. Okay? And then Michael is saying, well, now we have oscillometers, we have temperature meters, other kind of sensors. And that means that other people are going to make hardware money. But you know where the money here is more in the software. And remember this story here. Hardware, every time you put a piece of hardware in something, it will cost you money and is incremental going up thing. When you do software, once you finish developing it, the incremental cost of producing it is close to zero. Okay, couple more comments I want to make because I'm running out of time. One very interesting phenomenon is what I call innovations on the fringe, and I told you about this last time. A lot of businesses are built on top of eBay, built on top of Amazon, built on top of Google, etc. And actually, I do think this is the best chance for you. Begin with, large companies are not going to hire a lot of people in the future. Most of the new jobs in the US are created in the smaller companies. Many of you are going to go to Big Four, but that's not the end of your careers. And where the big bucks are going to be made is on new fringe products. And there is thousands of products that can be generated in the accounting and auditing domain. Actually, let's call it the financial domain. And I think that many of you are going to finish up doing. And I have actually had a couple of PA students starting to do startups and etc. But in addition to that, there'll be a lot of accounting and auditing business to do this startup business. So that's kind of interesting. I don't have a lot of time to go over these McKinsey trains, but I just want to talk about a couple of things here. Co-creation means what? Means that you get several people to create and cooperate. And, you know, I'll give you some examples of even co-work that people are not expecting. One of the ways to identify epidemics of flu in the United States used to be the Center for Disease Control and etc. You know what do? They just look at queries to Google. If people are checking a lot about cues to common cold or medicines for common cold, that's a symptom that people have colds. And just by measuring that, you kind of get a better measurement than the Center for Disease Control can weeks in advance. That doesn't necessarily mean that there is an epidemic. It also means that maybe the advertising campaign of Dayquil or NightQuil became very hot. But there is a whole new set of sensors that you notice. Yes? Yeah. Yeah, and you know, it's kind of the co-creation or co-utilization.